Welcome into this week's The Women's Basketball Podcast, your one-stop shop for all things WNBA college hoops. I guess I can still say unrivaled and much, much more. Mia O'Brien, SB Nation's Mitchell Northam joins me as he does each and every week here on The Women's Basketball Podcast, where something tells me, Mitch, you, producer Dimitri, the folks at OG Triangle Media are very excited to discuss sports without having to mention Bill Belichick or Jordan Hudson this week. How are you, my friend?
I don't know who's Jordan Hudson. Who's that?
There's new Jordan rules, but also Michael Jordan's in the news. But
do you mean third place Miss Maine?
I mean, well, second runner-up. Second runner-up is the formal way of addressing the third place finisher.
If you ain't first, you're last.
Competition. Of note, ACC spring meetings are going on right now as we speak in my neck of the woods in Amelia Island. Have not confirmed if Bill Belichick is in attendance. Not sure if you've seen anything. We had a show up there today. He is okay. He did take the private jet back from the Miss Maine competition.
Apparently, they're doing a live Sports Center from the ACC meetings tomorrow, and Bill Belichick is going to be on there, as is our friend Neil Ivey. And I'm very curious if Neil Ivey will actually be asked any poignant questions that I now have more of after watching Full Court Press, which we'll get into.
We will get into that in this week's starting five. But first, our her of the week. It's a joint her of the week this week. I needed to fit this somehow into this week's pod. We're giving the her of the week to Aaliyah Boston for getting out in front of the narrative and squashing the beef. In case you missed it, there was a viral video post-game after the Fever's defeat of the Atlanta Dream in their final preseason game, in which Naz Hillman comes racing over to Aaliyah Boston. They have some very pointed words with each other. Meanwhile, you've got some other Dream players come over. They start hugging Aaliyah. And essentially, this clip goes viral within minutes. Aaliyah Boston hops on the Twitter machine and she says, at Naz Hillman, please tell the people ain't no beef, because they taking this and running with it. To which Naz replied, oh my God, they're dragging it. All jokes, babes, wish y'all saw our handshake after see you soon, AB. Someone else replies, girl, they were ready to pounce on you. And she goes, and Naz goes, I was getting virtually jumped. That ain't never happened to me before. I couldn't believe my eyes. So shout out to Aaliyah. Shout out to Naz. Squash the beef. Get in front of the narrative early. Clearly, it was no beef, although it was definitely a pretty heated post-game conversation, right?
Yeah, I wasn't really sure what to make of that because, it was clearly like there was some tension there, but then nobody like rushed over to sort of like break it up. So I was like, okay, well, maybe this is the handled situation, or maybe it's a joke, or but clearly it seems like they've handled it online.
Oh, correct me if I'm wrong too. Like I think Haley Jones like goes over and then starts like hugging Aaliyah too. So
it was very strange. Yeah,
definitely one of our stranger her of the weeks. This week's starting five has plenty of strange too. Kick us off, Mitch, as WNBA final rosters are cut down this week. Some surprising cuts around the league, including many friends of the program.
Yeah, today, Monday, as we're recording this episode, is cut day, apparently, in the WNBA. And I just wanted to hit on three rookies that were cut. So one of them is Deja Kelly, another is Serena Sundell, and the third is Cheyenne Sellers, that I just wanted to kind of dive into real quick. On Deja Kelly, I think, she was undrafted after 4 years in North Carolina and 1 year at Oregon. She signs a training camp contract with the Las Vegas Aces. I think that Deja Kelly did enough in the preseason to show that she at least deserves another chance in the WNBA, and I think could be a pretty good WNBA player. She was only one of 6 rookies in the preseason to average double digits in scoring. You go back and look at her numbers, like she hit that game winner for the Aces in the one game. In 20 minutes of the preseason across 2 games, she had 24 points, 3 assists, shot 9 of 12 from the floor, like a pretty efficient all-around showing from her. I think that was one of the knocks on her coming out of college is, with a mid-range game, she's not efficient, she's not this, she's not that. For her to go undrafted and prove herself in this way, to show out pretty well in the preseason, I think she's somebody that deserves another shot in the WNBA, and I hope she gets it. Moving on, kind of pivoting to Serena Sundell, I don't really, this is another like just really puzzling move to me that Seattle decided to make. Third round draft pick. Okay, sure, fine. Third round picks cut all the time. But I feel like we didn't see a big enough sample size from Serena Sundell in the preseason to like really make a fair evaluation on like what she can be in the WNBA. She played in one game. She played 19 minutes. And they just decided to cut her. And I feel like Seattle's a team that needs guard depth. And I'm just kind of puzzled as to why they looked at her with that small sample size and decided, you know what, we've seen enough, we're good. So I wonder if she gets another shake by another team in the WNBA.
Before we get to Cheyenne Sellers and the double cut, because that is obviously a storyline dominating
Yeah.
women's basketball right now, I do want to hit pause because of those two cuts you referenced, Mitch.
Yeah.
When you look at both the Aces and the Storm roster, outside of the number 2 overall pick in Seattle and Dominique Malonga, who is in the United States, the 19-year-old is expected to play at some point in time in the WNBA season this summer, which is big ups to Seattle because not every internationally drafted player is going to be playing this summer, as is the case every year. And then when you look at the Aces, yes, they have their second round pick in, I always butcher her name, Aaliyah Nye,
From Alabama.
The Alabama wing, who, much like her former running mate in Sarah Ashley Barker, a fan favorite on this podcast, screams 3-and-D. The 3-point percentage was off the charts at Alabama, has flashed so far in three preseason games for the Aces. But that's it. These are two of the most veteran rosters in the WNBA. And it's something we talked about on last week's episode. In case you missed it, go check it out. And we talked about it in our preseason team by team preview. This idea of the Aces they're literally and figuratively pushing all their chips to the middle of the table. They are playing a card game, a table game, if you may, out there in Las Vegas and saying, we're all in with the roster we have now. We are in win now mode. Seattle feels like they're clinging to the past while bringing in this 19-year-old sensation and not really having much beyond her and Gabby Williams to really build around when it comes to the next 3 to 8 years, let's say. The Aces, I'm okay with it. I respect this idea of you have the best player in the world, not named Caitlin Clark and Asia Wilson, and you have arguably the most talented blue chip roster in the game. And so you say, we're going to cut our losses and say, we'll start reloading and having younger players waiting in the wings, maybe a couple seasons down the line, but we need to get back to the finals. It's just very interesting to juxtapose two of the more veteran rosters in the league and this decision to say, hey, maybe we don't need to have as many young kids waiting on the bench as we once did.
Yeah, I in terms of like Deja Kelly, I thought that she could be for them. I thought that what she was showing in the preseason was that she could kind of be that break in case of emergency, backup point guard. Like if something happens with Chelsea Gray, who has not had a history of, being fully healthy for the past couple seasons. So, I thought that like that was a role that she could fill for them. I guess they're just going to rely on Dana Evans for that, who, has proven herself to be a WNBA quality player. So, but yeah, I think Deja Kelly is going to get another shot somewhere. There are certainly teams that could use some point guard depth, and I think she can definitely be that. Serena Sundell, she just didn't really get a chance. So, we'll have to see kind of what happens with her. And then pivoting to Cheyenne Sellers.
Yes, let's hit the shy situation once again.
I saw a clip that someone shared of her playing in a preseason game with the Dream. And I think it was just kind of apparent that like she is probably not 100% healthy. I think there's a reason why she was pulled out of that college all-star game down in Tampa and did not play in that. I just don't think the knees are 100%. And this goes back to the point kind of that we were making on the last podcast about maybe it's a better idea for the WNBA to move the calendar back a bit, not only so you can give these players like Cheyenne Sellers, Georgia Amore, also dealing with an injury, just to give them a longer break from the college season that they've been playing and, really at a high level and practicing every day since October. But also to give, kind of pivoting to the Serena Sundell point, to give teams a longer span of time to evaluate these players properly. And so I think Cheyenne Sellers is just kind of a casualty of the calendar, and I hope she gets healthy, and I hope that she gets another chance. She was, one of my favorite players to watch and cover in college. But we'll see. Getting cut twice in the preseason is not great. I do think like the potential is there if she can get healthy and, kind of get back to the shy of old. There's a reason why she was, projected to be a first round pick at one point. But we'll see. It's certainly a bummer though for Cheyenne Sellers fans.
Let's keep it moving in this week's starting five. Let's pivot to the international ranks. Yes, that's right. In case you missed it, Sue Bird has been named the managing director of Team USA. In case you missed it, in the past, unlike the men's team, which of course featured one managing director who helped select and lead the charge in selecting the team members, both in the pool and then on the official roster, that of course being Grant Hill for the better part of the last few years. It was previously a committee. It will now be Sue Bird's responsibility, much like it is Grant Hill's responsibility on the men's side. Previous to Grant Hill, it was Jerry Colangelo, most famously. It will be her responsibility to making those decisions when it comes to personnel. Mitch, I think this is the right move, not just for the sake of progressive women, men's equal rights, but I also think it's the right move. In light of, perhaps some controversy the last Olympic cycle of, hey, you got too many cooks in the kitchen and maybe one voice is influencing the other as opposed to one person saying, hey, this is what we're going to do. Now, the counter argument is, let's say Sue Bird doesn't like somebody. Then that
Mm-hmm.
person never has a chance of making the Olympic team. I think what's important about this is I believe Sue's going to come up with a clear criteria. And if you meet the criteria, in the words of Isaiah Thomas, you will make the team, as opposed to being left in this gray area where it's subjective and up to the opinion of a couple and then a collective vote.
Yeah, and I'm sure that Sue is going to have kind of some advisors, some talent evaluators of sorts that she will kind of lean on for some opinions. I'm sure that she'll work pretty closely with whoever the next coach of the national team is, which is where I'm going to hijack this conversation and take
Go
that
for
to.
it. Go.
Because I saw a tweet from Madeline Kenny, who is the women's sports reporter at the New York Post, who was covering this Super press conference. And there is a tweet that says from Madeline, Sue Bird said there's no specific timeline on choosing a coach for the next year's World Cup in Berlin, which to me implies that Cheryl Reeve will not be the next coach of the national team. If there is not a timeline for picking a new coach, that sort of implies that there will be a new coach, I think. That's what my read on this. And that to me says that she will also not be the coach maybe for the 2028 Olympics in Los Angeles. The other Team USA news that came out recently is that Kara Lawson is going to coach Team USA at the AmeriCup this summer. And I think if you go back to our very first podcast episode with us together, I predicted that Kara Lawson would be the next coach of the U.S. senior national team at the 2028 Olympics. And I think we're on that path, but we'll see. But it would be pretty interesting, to have, you go back to the UConn Tennessee rivalry of the early 2000s, and Kara Lawson and Sue Bird are on the court a lot of times, with each other at the same time. It'd be pretty interesting if those are your two leaders of Team USA kind of going into the 2028 Olympics played here on American soil.
Let me ask you this, especially now with SB Nation and the idea of you covering multiple women's sports, not just basketball. The idea that Emma Hayes, regarded as one of the best female soccer coaches internationally over the past decade, steps in, takes over the United States national team program, and literally within 2 months makes the difficult decision to say, Alex Morgan, sorry, we're done. Like, we're not going to hang on by a thread. And if you want to try out, sure. But even if you make the team, you're not going to play. I am leaning all the way into our young talent. Yes, it may be unfamiliar and unfamiliar new faces to our fans. I don't care. I want the best team out there. What does this mean to the old guard, many of whom played with Sue on the senior national team, but also with Sue trying to put the United States in the best position to succeed long term?
Yeah, I think it puts some responsibility on her and maybe empowers her to, whereas you have one person making this decision instead of a committee who's maybe doing some hand wringing and, some, leaning one way or the other, it empowers Sue to kind of make those hard decisions and make the hard choices and say to, some elder players, maybe reaching their late 30s. Like, I don't think we're ever going to have like a Diana Taurasi on Team USA again. I don't think we're ever going to have somebody past the age of 38 playing for Team USA. Like we have a talent pool now in women's basketball that is deep enough where like the torch has to be handed off at some point. And there were a lot of people making compelling and you could say right arguments about the last Olympic team that Diana Taurasi probably shouldn't have been on that team. Like she really was not a game changer for that team. I think there was a couple games where she didn't even play or didn't play a whole lot. So it's kind of like, yeah, I think we're at a point now where, you know, you empower somebody to kind of make those hard decisions, to make those hard cuts, to either say it's past your time, or to a younger player, you have to wait your turn. Because we have some players in the prime of their career right now who give us the best chance to win. And, you know, it's, you know, as we saw in that game, that gold medal game last year, where France gave US, you know, a real run for their money, it's no longer, I think, like a, you know, 100% guarantee that the US is going to go into every Olympics and just roll over the competition. You know, there are countries that are kind of catching up a little bit and developing really good talent. So, yeah, I think this is the right step in the right direction for Team USA.
Two names. I don't want to single them out, but I'm just curious. Brittany Griner, currently 34. Chelsea Gray, 32. Is that an example of a player who in 3 years' time, maybe Sue Bird has to have a difficult conversation?
Yeah, I mean, Brittany Griner, so you'll be 37 by the time the Olympics roll around. I think that's somebody who you have to say, thank you. We appreciate everything you've done, but now it's Aaliyah Boston's time. Now it's Cameron Brink's time.
Cameron Brink. Thank you. There was another name I was thinking, another name who's made it clear she's going to be at the Olympics in 2028, whether she's on the United States roster or not. That is, of course, one Angel Reese. We don't know if she'll be in the stands or if she'll be on the roster, but yeah, hey, listen, Aaliyah has done
TBD.
her time. Cam Brink has been as vital, as integral a member of the 3x3 United States national team pool since she was 18, 19 years old, if not younger. So yes, those would be two names that, so long as Cam comes back from that ACL tear, which we fully expect her to this summer. Yeah. Probably.
And Chelsea Gray as well. I mean, she might be at a point where, you know, I mean, we have, look, all these really good guards coming up. Like Caitlin's going to need a spot on that team. Paige Beckers is going to need a spot on that team. Will AZ Fudd be ready for a spot on that team? I don't know.
Juju Watkins.
Will Juju Watkins be ready for a spot on that team? Maybe. Like there's a lot of competition and really good players coming up, and like comes a point in time where like it's time for you to move on.
Speaking of Juju Watkins, and speaking of Caitlin Clark, they certainly have been central players in many of the behind-the-scenes documentaries that have been done over the last few years. Caitlin, of course, was one of the 3 stars of last year's Full Court Press, the first ever series by ESPN Plus that embedded a documentary unit with 3 different programs and 3 different players. Last year it was Caitlin Clark, Camila Cardoso, and Kiki Rice of Iowa, almost LSU, South Carolina. And see, now I got Angel Reese on the brain. We'll get to you later, Angel. Stop dominating my brain. Kiki Rice and UCLA, probably our first introduction into Corey Close's program that made it all the way to the Final Four this year. This season, a new triumvirate, we'll call it, of characters. Flau'jae Johnson of LSU, Hannah Hidalgo of Notre Dame, Kiki Iriafen of USC, Juju Watkins' teammate. Mitch, I have not sat down and watched it from start to finish.
Okay.
I have not. I'm reserving that for later this week. Have you actually sat down and watched it from start to finish?
I have. I watched the final 2 episodes this morning.
Okay.
And yeah, I have some thoughts.
Let's hear them. And you can spoil it. I'm sure many of our listeners have heard it.
There's not much to spoil. Like, you know, we all kind of saw the season. I wouldn't say like there's a lot of shocking stuff to be revealed. I do want to say, like, I think Full Court Press is a good thing, and I think it's a good product. It's a very interesting. My biggest takeaway from this version of it is you can really tell the difference between these 3 programs, USC, LSU, and in particular Notre Dame, in terms of how they control access and how they want their athletes to be presented and how hands-on they want to be in the process of making it. I thought that Flau'jae Johnson was the most revealing and the most interesting, and I think perhaps because of that, made her seem to me the most likable subject in this series. There were times where she was really, really vulnerable. And we really did get an inside look at kind of the key beats of her season. There was the start of the season where she's kind of reckoning with, this is my team now, and Angel Reese is no longer here, and the whole thing. There's that loss to South Carolina where after the end of the game, that DJ played the song by her father, and the camera follows Flage out of the South Carolina floor into the locker room, and like she gives real thought and emotion about hearing that song. And we get like this whole part of the series that's a part of that's about her dad, and kind of tells her dad's story as a rapper in Savannah, Georgia. I thought that was fascinating. We get a scene where Flage Johnson is in Kim Mulkey's closet and like going through her outfits and stuff, which I also thought was fascinating. I thought like Kim Mulkey also came across as likable in this series, and like just like is she has the riz, as the kids say. Like she has charisma. She's wanting to do this. We're in Kim Mulkey's practices and stuff. We get to the point in the season where Flage is having trouble with the shin splints, and we get the on-camera moment where Kim is just like, Flage ain't playing tomorrow, like in the middle of a practice. Right. And like, I thought all that stuff was like super fascinating. And it was a really like deep inside look at kind of Flage and her relationship with Kim and kind of her whole career. And it was really well done. Then you go to the part of USC. And while I didn't think that Kiki Iriafen was as interesting as Flage Johnson, it was a really interesting like behind the scenes look at their program as well. And like you go with them to Paris, and there's a lot of stuff. The biggest part of the USC thing that stood out to me is like they go in the huddle with Lindsey Gottlieb, right after Juju Watkins' injury. So like you get the real time, like her reaction and what her message is to the players and all that stuff. You also go in the locker room with them after that second round win over Mississippi State. I thought that was really well done. So like that was a big like key emotional moment, and like ESPN was there and they had the content and they had the footage, and like it was really well done. Then you get to the Notre Dame part of it.
Oh
and so I mentioned how we spent time in Kim Mulkey's closet. We spent more time in Kim Mulkey's closet than we did on Notre Dame's stretch of 3 losses in 5 games at the end of the season. There was no mention of the hour-long post-game locker room meetings that happened after the losses to Florida State and after the loss to Duke at the ACC tournament. There was almost, it was a really quick like run through of like, oh yeah, we lost three games in 5 games, and we're in a slump right now, and like, but there's no there they don't give us any details about that. And I don't fault ESPN for that, because I'm fairly certain that they probably have the footage. It was probably just that one of two things happened: either they got the footage and Notre Dame said you ain't showing that, or Hannah Hidalgo's representation said no, you ain't showing that, or they were shut out of the locker room or kicked out of the locker room during those long post-game meetings. We get to the end of the documentary, the end of episode 4. So we kind of go through like Flage's decision to come back to LSU. We follow Kiki Iriafen through the WNBA draft. Yep. You know what else happened around that same time? Olivia Miles decided to transfer to TCU, the team that they lost to in the Sweet 16. And there's no mention there. It's mentioned that Olivia Miles enters the transfer portal, but there's no mention that she goes to TCU. And they just like kind of play this clip of like these news anchors talking about the people who have left Notre Dame, and then you get a little meeting between Hannah Hidalgo and Neil Ivey. We spent more time with like Hannah Hidalgo making TikToks than we did of like what actually happened with Notre Dame at the end of the season.
However, there is a pretty viral, if only meme,
yes,
that's going around. I know plenty of folks that I've spoken to were kind of surprised that that topic even was approached given the nature of Notre Dame historically, not only with their views potentially on, some more conservative viewpoints, we'll call it. But additionally, many of the rumors and the underbelly that has swirled regarding why Olivia Miles potentially could have transferred.
Yeah, there was a clip. I think this is in episode 2. Maybe it's in episode 1. I can't remember. One of the first 2 episodes where an interviewer is talking to Olivia Miles and they bring up the Candace Owens Don Lemon video that she
Hannah
shared.
Hidalgo, you mean? Not or the
I'm
was it
sorry.
Olivia? Yeah.
Hannah,
You're okay. You're okay.
Hannah Hidalgo
Yes.
isn't being interviewed. Olivia Miles is not interviewed at all in this documentary.
She's not in it at all.
She's, you see her face a couple times. Yeah, so they bring up the clip of Candace Owens talking to Don Lemon, which Hannah Hidalgo shared on her Instagram story over last summer, where basically Candace Owens says that gay marriage is a sin and, all this other stuff. And it was perceived as homophobic, and it very much is a homophobic statement and a homophobic clip. And Hannah Hidalgo deleted that from her Instagram story. There was a lot of outrage and all that sort of stuff about it. I believe Muffet McGraw commented about this on Sarah Spain's podcast at one point and kind of called her out about it. So during this documentary, they asked Hannah, the interviewer, whoever's doing it, are you homophobic? And she says, "Oh no, I have lots of gay friends," something to that effect. It's not a great look. She says, like,
It's like, no offense, but like I have a lot of gay friends is like when people are racist and you're like, I have lots of black friends.
Yes.
And it's like, no, it doesn't.
It was
work
absolutely like the same tune. I have lots of friends who are homosexual, I believe is what she said. And it was not a good look. But like based on the rest of the documentary, where like we don't get access into Notre Dame's locker room during those pivotal moments late in the season, either after the losses to NC State, we don't go in their locker room. After the loss to Florida State, the hour-long post-game meeting, not in their locker room at all. After the loss to Duke at the ACC tournament in Greensboro, North Carolina, not in their locker room at all. Based on that is not in there, but this part of the documentary interview where she claims to not be a homophobe is in there. That tells me that like someone at Notre Dame thought that was a good look. And I would just tell them that it is very much not that. My follow-up to Hannah Hidalgo, and I don't know if the interviewer asked this, would have been, okay, if you are not a homophobe, then what part of Candace Owens' statement did you agree with that compelled you to share this on your social media? And are you someone who often agrees with Candace Owens? That would have been my follow-up. But so those are my thoughts in whole about Full Court Press. I hope they do it again next year. Again,
I hope Olivia Miles is one of the 3.
That would be fascinating.
Throw it out into the ether. We need more Mark Campbell. He became a star this spring. In light of the Sedona Prince cover-up situation, which I'm realizing we didn't even include that in the rundown. Maybe we get to that in last call. Point being, it's a great, compelling series. I appreciate ESPN shining the light on women's basketball, but I don't know if we will ever know what occurred at Notre Dame, our national champion, the final month of the 2024-2025 season, Mitch. It's confounding.
I had some hope after like that clip in the first 2 episodes. I was like, okay, maybe we'll get to some stuff here in the last 2. No, we did not. We did not get to anything.
For the sake of time, let's keep it moving with this week's starting 5 quickly. Thoughts on the final weekend of the preseason in the WNBA. Of course, the regular season tips off this Friday, May 16th. Obviously, for the Indiana Fever, a significant injury perhaps in Sophie Cunningham rolling her ankle in Atlanta against the Dream. However, I should note, Mitch, that she posted a TikTok of her highlights as well as like mashed together with like Sophie Cunningham things while on the plane ride back to Indianapolis. So I think she's okay. She assured Stephanie White she's okay. Steph White has echoed that she's okay. I think this is a Fever team, as we discussed last week. They have enough pieces. They can maneuver that offense, massage the roster and the lineup itself to where they can cover up an absence even from their star six player, who we believe could potentially be the sixth player of the year in the WNBA. Another note from me, the Valkyries and the Sun pick up a dub in the final last few days of the preseason, which I wanted to note because I wanted to get it out there on the record before we get to our preseason Wubbies, which are coming up later in the show. We are giving you some love, Valkyries and Sun. We are giving you some love. Don't you forget it.
I have some weird breaking news.
Oh,
okay. Breaking news from Talia Goodman on Twitter. So we're familiar with Gracie Merkel from Penn State,
yes,
right?
very familiar. Yeah, because she of
Okay.
course started her career at Bellarmine, in the A-Sun Conference, called a couple of her games.
Yeah. 6'6" center. Transferred to the University of Maryland.
Yes.
Or so we thought.
Uh-oh.
Apparently, this says breaking: Penn State's Gracie Merkel is withdrawing her name from the transfer portal and returning to Penn State.
What? Did Talia get hacked? No way. No way.
This is also from, if people are familiar with the Twitter account, Raul.
Yes.
Who tweets about women's basketball a lot.
Did Skim Mulkey tweet anything yet?
He has also shared this. Do we have a Skim Mulkey tweet? I don't have a Skim Mulkey tweet yet.
Okay, so I believe Talia, but at the same time, I need to see Skim Mulkey.
Yeah, I'm gonna shoot a text to somebody at Maryland while we're talking later in the podcast.
Okay, well, that's obviously a massive development. Because part of why we had Maryland, and this is a great segue to the final note in this week's starting five, the way too early top 25 in women's college basketball for 2025-2026. Part of why we predicted Maryland will be in the Final Four come April of 2026, Mitch, is because we thought Gracie Merkel would be on the Terps roster.
Yeah, I literally just wrote a way too early post-transfer portal top 25 today that has Maryland at number 5 for this very reason. Gracie Merkel, Aluchi Okinawa, and Jordan Garzon all coming to the Terps. Apparently, Gracie Merkel, no more coming to the Terps, which is wild. I'll see if I can confirm that. But yeah, this is out of date now. I'm going to have to adjust my expectations for Maryland because Gracie Merkel is somebody who is a formidable post presence. I guess it doesn't change my top 4. Who I'll just.
I was going to say, who's your top 4? Give us that top 4.
I'll give you that real quick and get your reaction. So I have UCLA at number 4. I know they lost a lot of their depth, a lot of their freshman class in the transfer portal, but they did get Gianna Neepkins, one of the best shooters in the portal. They're also going to get a healthy Charlize Slater-Walker. They're also going to get Lauren Betts' younger sister, who is the number 2 recruit in the country. I have South Carolina at number 3. I have UConn at number 2. And I have LSU at number 1.
We are all in. This is a Malaysia Full Wiley program. Like Holly Rowe, if you want to join, like please come on over to join us in this Malaysia Full Wiley love fest each and every week on the Women's Basketball Podcast, because we proclaimed back in January, before this concept, this notion of, well, if she doesn't get enough playing time, is she even going to be on WNBA radars? We proclaimed, Mitch, at the end of January, she was the National Player of the Year that no one was talking about because she was only playing 17, 18 minutes per game. Now she goes to LSU. My question for you is she option 1? I would think the answer is no, because Flau'jae Johnson is still in Baton Rouge. Is she option 2, though?
Probably. I think there's going to be someone made the point to me like, well, LSU doesn't have a true point guard, and I don't know that it matters. Like when you have Flau'jae Johnson, Malaysia Puwali, and Michaela Williams, I think all of those players are capable of being a point guard. Does it mean that one of them is going to average 5 or 6 assists a year? Probably not. But can, one of them per game, put up 5 assists? Like, hey, it's your turn today to kind of be the distributor. I think that can certainly be a possibility. We just saw Michaela Williams and Malaysia Fulwiley play together really, really well at 3-on-3 tournament. I think that part of that is going to be able to translate. I feel like Flau'jae is going to be somebody who's very motivated to make whatever the roster is work next year. Whether that's alongside Malaysia Fulwiley and Michaela Williams, and also Kate Colval and Amaya Joyner from East Carolina, and also the three top 25 recruits that they have coming in next year. Really good freshman class coming in OSU. So I just feel like on paper, like this is the team.
Did we become a Kim Mulkey podcast too in 37 minutes of recording this podcast?
Many are saying.
Many are saying. Let's get to our preseason Wubbie Awards. In case you missed it, we're calling it the Wubbies, our women's basketball awards. We did our postseason in the college ranks earlier this spring. Now we have our preseason Wubbies for the WNBA, as well as some props. Thank you to all of our friends up in North Carolina. Thank you, Mitch, for getting some of these betting lines, since unfortunately myself in the Sunshine State, I don't have necessarily the access to some of these wonderful betting lines when it comes to WNBA and college basketball on the women's side. So appreciate you getting these lines, doing the heavy lifting. My job for this portion of the show was to come up with our 5 preseason awards. Some of these, there's some crossover from our postseason college Wubbies that I think you all will appreciate. Shout out to friend of the pod, Rebecca Kopelman, for helping me workshop some of these as well. So we begin, as I feel like we do every OG Triangle Media enterprise conglomerate show. We're going to talk bus drivers. Mitch, who is your preseason bus driver of the year in the WNBA?
My preseason bus driver of the year is Kelsey Plum. I wrote down wrongly in our Google Doc here.
He wrote the Aces.
Here. He wrote the Aces. Kelsey Plum, not of the Las Vegas Aces, Kelsey Plum of the Los Angeles Sparks. I think is going to be my bus driver of the year. I think that Kelsey Plum has a pretty good chance to lead the WNBA in scoring this year. I think that she is going to a team where she is going to be the number one scoring option, which is something that she has not been for most of her WNBA career. She's often either been, second fiddle to Asia Wilson, and at times on those Aces team, third or fourth to Jackie Young and Chelsea Gray and, whoever else has been on those teams. So Kelsey Plum is going to have the ball in her hand a whole lot. She's playing for a coach who likes to take a lot of threes, and Lynn Roberts. If you go over to, I'm getting these lines from DraftKings, your favorite for the regular season points per game leader is Asia Wilson at -120. Caitlin Clark is next up at +450. I think that's really good value on Caitlin Clark too, if you guys want to take that. The Kelsey Plum is +2,000. And I think there's a real chance that Kelsey Plum could lead the W in scoring this season.
I promise the reason I didn't pick her was I had a feeling that you would, Mitch. And I should have led off by saying, for those of you who are new to the pod, you're getting ready for the WNBA regular season. When we say bus driver, we are not saying the best scorer, the best overall player. We are saying the player who will carry their team. If they are not on the floor, that team cannot go the same distance that they would if they weren't there. And so, yes, I agree. And certainly with Cam Brink not expected back until later this summer, what will that dynamic look like between two West Coast natives? I think that that's going to be fascinating. We're going to get to another player who I think factors into that a little bit later in the preseason awards, in one Rakea Jackson, a fellow former first-round pick, how she factors into this Lynn Roberts offense. I think it's going to be fascinating to see. But yes, undoubtedly, in terms of go get me a bucket right now, I think Kelsey Plum has as green a light as she's ever had in her career.
Indeed. I just want to say that I have heard from a source in Maryland, and yeah, that's real. Gracie Merkel will not be a Terp.
Did she get to College Park?
I don't know. My guess is no. I mean, she certainly visited, because we have pictures of her in a Maryland uniform that were shared with that press release that said, hey, Gracie Merkel and Yarden Garzon are going to be Maryland Terrapins, but maybe she stayed at Penn State to finish out her classes for the semester, perhaps. And maybe over the course of that, she decided maybe
Penn State found a pot of gold and said, hey, Gracie, why don't you stay?
Gracie, if you follow that rainbow, maybe there's a pot of gold.
You probably could go to a national championship, or you can make some money and be the face of a middling program in the Big Ten. Just kidding, Penn State fans.
Maybe she said, you know what? I want to play alongside the product.
warms my heart. I could talk about the product. I could talk about the college transfer portal chaos all day, but we do have some other awards we got to get to. My bus driver of the year nominee, I present Nafisa Collier. Yes, she is undoubtedly the most marquee player on a team that finished as the WNBA runner-ups a season ago. Yes, you could argue that her head coach and Cheryl Reeve could be a bus driver as well, or at the very least lighten the load for Fee. I come back to this idea, Mitch, and I'm curious your take. And I say this as Courtney Williams is from up the road in Charlton County from me. Love Charlton County. Think I've talked about it on the show before. Quick Chick, one of my favorite pseudo local fast food establishments in the country. With that said, Courtney Williams, Kayla McBride, certainly a lot of role players on this team around Nafisa Collier. Did they catch lightning in a bottle last year, or what we saw in September and October, is that who the Minnesota Lynx can be year in and year out?
I think it's possible. I think it could be both. I think there's a chance that it was just lightning in a bottle and we got, Courtney Williams playing the best basketball of her life. I think there's also a possibility that Nafisa Collier has kind of hit a new level and made a jump to being one of the elite players in the sport and a bus driver that is someone who doesn't always lean on her scoring, but a lot of times she drives the bus by her defense and by her rebounding and that sort of thing. I think there's a chance that, if you're looking for kind of a dark horse MVP bet, Nafisa Collier is currently third in odds at DraftKings at plus 400. I think that's a pretty decent bet. She's second in odds for Defensive Player of the Year again, which she was last year. I think that's certainly a possibility as well. But yeah, we're going to find out for sure this season on whether or not that Lynx run was, lightning in a bottle or whether it is replicable.
Right. And I think that a lot of it stems from great coaching, to be clear. I think that when you have great coaching, you don't have to have 4 first-team all WNBA selections like the Las Vegas Aces have had for much of the last 5 years. But at the same time, I just come back to were all of those players playing, and outside of Nafisa Collier, who I agree, I think Fee has reached this other level, were those other players playing at their peak and on an absolute heater? And now we're going to live in a world in which, because you don't have these other players who are shooting lights out consistently from start to finish of a regular season from beyond the arc, if you need to get a bucket, everybody's looking at one person, and it's Nafisa Collier. I think that Courtney Williams certainly has the ability, and certainly so does Kayla McBride, to go off on any given night and to get you that bucket, especially from three-point range. But I think that in terms of who do we look to when we need a bucket most, I think the Lynx have evolved to where Fee is that component.
Yeah, for sure. I think if you're the Lynx, like you would like for in a perfect world for Nafisa Collier not to have to carry you offensively, but she can certainly is capable of doing that. And we've seen that. But really when they were at their best last year was during that playoff run when Courtney Williams was playing out of her mind and they got a couple other players to kind of pop off here and there. And Nafisa could kind of just let the game come to her and could, use all that energy on the defensive end where she was Defensive Player of the Year.
We don't do the typical preseason MVP, preseason breakout player of the year award here on the Wubbies. So our next award, Silent Assassin, our breakout candidate shooter of the year. Mitch, who is your pick for the Silent Assassin, our breakout shooter in the W this season?
I'm taking Ryan Howard, who we will get to in a different award. I believe your Proof of Concept of the Year award. But she's now playing for a coach that wants her to take a lot of threes. And that is Carl Smesko, who wanted all of his players to take a lot of threes at Florida Gulf Coast. And she is now in a system where he's going to want to do that in the WNBA as well. I looked at kind of just, her preseason sample size a little bit for this exercise. And she, in her last preseason game, took 11 3-pointers. In the one before that, she took 9 3-pointers. Now she's shooting 6 of 20 for the year, so far in the preseason, which is not great. But I think those numbers are going to go up. Ryan Howard was a pretty good 3-point shooter in college. She made about 2.5 per game, shot about 38% for her career. I think there's a chance that she maybe even leads the WNBA in 3-pointers made. You can bet on that at DraftKings. The favorite, of course, is Caitlin Clark, followed by Sabrina Ionescu, and then Kelsey Plum, and then Rike Gumbawale, all players capable of doing this. But if Ryan Howard is going to be taking 9 to 11 3-pointers per game, we'll see how many of them she makes. I think betting on her to lead the league in threes made at plus 1,400 is pretty enticing. And I think it's possible in a offense coached by Carl Smesko.
I will also nominate a player who is going to, I believe, outperform numbers, not just from her college career, but certainly the 35% she shot from 3-point range in her rookie season, because she now has a head coach who wants her to shoot the three, who wants all of her players to shoot the three. And that would be Rikeya Jackson of the Los Angeles Sparks, coached now by Lynn Roberts, formerly of the University of Utah. Go Utes. Um, I think that what's interesting about this selection, Mitch, because I workshopped it before I present it to you here on the Women's Basketball Podcast. This idea of Rikeya Jackson isn't known for her 3-point shooting, but I came away from the Unrivaled season, and look, I understand that's not 5-on-5, but I was so impressed by the development of her shooting stroke from all over the court. She, in my opinion, of that rookie class from 2024 that played in Unrivaled down in South Florida this offseason, she was by far and away the player who I said, oh my goodness, look at the leap that she made. Now, perhaps that's because Caitlin Clark did not play in Unrivaled. Cam Brink did not play in Unrivaled. Kate Martin, I think, set the world on fire last year, so your expectations were pretty high for her playing in Unrivaled this past winter. But ultimately, for me, I came away and said, wow, it feels like Rikeya has gotten in the gym. She has clearly made not only adjustments to her shooting stroke, but also looks more comfortable. She certainly did the last month and a half or so, finished as the second leading scorer, yes, on a Sparks team that was among the league worst in offensive output. But at the same time, I just felt like, wow, like this felt like a player who needed a little bit of time, much like we talked about earlier in the show, because you don't have a ton of time between the college season ending and diving right into the professional ranks. Maybe she needed a little bit of time to catch up, and I feel like she's going to have that opportunity, especially with no Cam Brink for the first month plus of the season.
Yeah, I'm with you. I mean, I think she was one of the more impressive players in Unrivaled, and I think some of that will translate to having success in the WNBA. She had a really solid rookie season. Like you mentioned, she's going to get the chance to play alongside not only a healthy Cam Brink, hopefully later this season, but also Kelsey Plum. Like the defense is not going to be as focused on Rikeya probably as they were when she was a rookie, where she was, one of the few offensive players really playing well for the Sparks towards the end of the season. So yeah, I think her to have a bounce back year, a better year, an improved year is a good bet to make.
Thanks to friend of the pod, Rebecca Kopelman, for the inspiration for that award. By the way, Rebecca's pick, Aaliyah Edwards of the Washington Mystics. I really like that shout. Unfortunately, because we know Aaliyah's been dealing with that lower back injury, and it feels like the Mystics across the board have been beat up. I was a little hesitant to go out on that limb, so I'm going to go with Rikeya Jackson instead. Let's get to our mess of the year. I'll lead this one off, Mitch. I have found the ongoing online drama, regardless of who said what, whose Twitter account is now private. This notion that Nike has gone out of its way to market A'ja Wilson, but they are not doing enough for one Caitlin Clark, to the point that Connor McCaffrey is subtweeting about it. This is, of course, Caitlin Clark's boyfriend, then deleting his tweets. You've got A'ja Wilson going private with her Twitter account. Yes. Gatorade's out here putting out a new Caitlin commercial every other week. I think it's a fascinating storyline, and I think that it actually is a sign of positive growth, because we've gotten past the, oh my goodness, they want to intentionally hurt her, and oh my goodness, like she gets treated differently. Now we're just in a world where we're like, Nike, you don't do a good job of promoting women's basketball across the board, because, oh wait, you don't have a women's basketball division. And so now what gives? Now we're looking at this from the collective of Caitlin was supposed to be, as well as A'ja, a reason that you got into the women's basketball space, and now you're managing to drop the ball there. So what gives, Nike? I'm here for that mess of the year.
Yeah. And there's so much like so many layers to the South Carolina Iowa thing. Yeah, it is one of
I
the
see what's
more.
funny is I don't view like the South Carolina Iowa thing is certainly a thing, but I would
Mhm.
argue the Iowa LSU friction rivalry, I would argue that that's a stronger point of contention than South Carolina.
I think that it probably should be, but I feel like maybe it's because I have a lot of South Carolina people on my Twitter feed based on just kind of like where I am. But I feel like there's like something there between the South Carolina and the Iowa people. And I think this is a part of it, but yeah, it is certainly like one of the more messier corners of women's basketball internet.
You have a pick for mess of the year, Mitch, that is also going to be a nominee for our fourth of five preseason Wubbies, which is tank of the year. The Golden State Valkyries, nominee twice in this preseason award show, because we really don't know what to make of you.
Yeah, I just all due respect to Monique Billings, who I covered when she was a rookie with the Atlanta Dream. All due respect to Kate Martin, who I like a lot and like watch playing. All due respect to Elisa Cunane, former NC State player who has made this Valkyries roster. And all due respect to Tiffany Hayes and all the other people on this team. I don't
Teme,
think
Teme.
Teme, Caitlin Chen.
Shout out
Um,
Caitlin Chen.
I don't think this team is going to be very good. I think this team is going to be really, really bad. And I just kind of look at the roster makeup of this team and I questioned what they were doing exactly in the expansion draft. I questioned what they were doing in the college draft. I just don't think this is a good roster. And I think it's going to be a really rough first season for the Valkyries. If you go over to DraftKings, they have the lowest over under mark for wins that you can bet on. Their over under is 9.5. 9.5. We're in the single digits. And actually, you can get plus odds on betting the over at plus 100 for them to win 10 games this season. Um, and yeah, I think it's just going to be a really rough year for Coach Natalie and the Golden State Valkyries. And I think that they're going to have the number one overall pick next year, or at least the odds in the lottery to get the number one overall pick. And maybe they will get Easy Fudd or Olivia Miles, and maybe they'll do, some work in free agency after the new CBA comes out and all that stuff. And we have a little bit of a different picture. I think that this is going to be an attractive place for free agents to play in years to come. So I kind of wonder with like the CBA looming, like did they just kind of take a mulligan on this season and decide we're not going to spend a lot of on our roster and like we're just going to be shit for the first year and then we'll figure it out. I think that's what we have here. I think it's going to be real bad.
Well, I will give the Valkyries fans, if you do end up winning Tank of the Year as well as Mess of the Year, I will give you some hope. The team that I think both Mitch and myself would undoubtedly give Mess of the Year to in an NBA postseason awards ceremony, that being the Dallas Mavericks after trading away Luka Doncic for a oft injured Anthony Davis. Breaking news once again on the pod. The Mavs just won the NBA lottery, and so they have
Oh,
earned the right to
wow.
select Duke's Cooper Flag. Ian Rappaport, of course, is getting on the action because, of course, he is.
Ian Rappaport?
Yeah, of the NFL Network. You never thought Ian Rappaport would sneak his way onto the women's basketball podcast, but he did. Him and the Jaguars, good for you guys, always finding a way in. He
Sure.
tweeted that perhaps it's reverse karma, perhaps it's irony. I say it's hope for the Valkyries that, hey, you can be an absolute laughing stock and somehow fall ass backwards into a generational player. And maybe that's what you do next draft, 2026. Olivia Miles, Lauren Betts, whoever it may be.
Man, Nico Harrison. I guess it worked out, but I'd rather have Luca still. But anyways,
Of note though, so you can be a mess of the year winner. So Golden State Valkyries, it's okay. It's gonna be all right. You could be the best of the year, and you could still have the last laugh, like Nico
how about
Harrison.
Dallas? You get Paige Beckers and Cooper Flag in the same year. That's you
I,
know,
with all due respect to David Stern up in heaven right now, I wonder if he's still pulling some strings. pretty good for American Airlines. Just saying.
Sure.
Pretty good for the city of Dallas. Let's get to our second to last award, or our other nominee, I should say, for Tank of the Year, besides the Golden State Valkyries. That is the Connecticut Sun. Last week, Mitch, we spent plenty of time reviewing the starting five that the Connecticut Sun and their new look coaching staff and entirely new look roster, because they're the first team in WNBA history to go to the postseason and lose all five of their starting players who started in that postseason run in the offseason. I'm happy to report that Marina Mabrey was back against the New York Liberty this weekend, a preseason game that the Connecticut Sun, won. So they beat the New York Liberty, if only in the preseason. Hang the banner. Marina Mabrey was back after missing preseason game number 1 with an injury. Of course, in case you missed it, the New Jersey native and Notre Dame product asked for a trade this offseason, which has gone unfulfilled. JC Sheldon also cracked the starting lineup. So we didn't have Haley Peters and Robin Parks, our good friends, who had a grand total of, I think it was like 2 years of WNBA service in the last 10 years between the two of them. So hey, shout out to JC for getting into the starting lineup. Certainly will be a factor in that rotation. I actually thought about making her a silent assassin nominee, just because I think she's going to have a ton of looks, because they don't have a lot of shooters in Connecticut. Tank of the Year, Golden State Valkyries, Connecticut Sun. Who's getting the number 1 overall pick, Mitch, in 2026?
I think the Sun are going to be a little bit better than the Valkyries, but there's a pretty good chance I'll be proven wrong, because I think the Sun are also going to be not very good. I do just think that like the Sun have a little bit more talent, like in terms of just like talented players that are playing on their roster right now. Like as we previously mentioned, like, you know, the Valkyries first round pick is not playing for them this year. The Sun, you know, do have Anissa Morrow and Sanaya Rivers, and they have a couple other players that you've mentioned. Like I think there's a chance that I don't want to say they're not going to be a playoff team, but I don't think they're going to be the worst team in the league. They are, however, if you look at the over-under win totals this year, there's a set at 11.5, and you can get over 11.5 at plus 100 odds. I think there's a decent chance they win 12 games. I think that's possible.
Let's get to our two final nominees of the Wubby preseason WNBA awards. And these are two teams that maybe will be postseason contenders. Maybe they won't. This final award is our proof of concept award. We went through this one with our women's college basketball postseason Wubbies, and you guys love this one. So we're going to do it for the preseason and the W2. My nominee, someone we talk about a ton on this program, because not only is he a friend of the pod, but also because we're very fascinated to see what it looks like in the professional ranks. That's Carl Semesco and the Atlanta Dream. They're going to shoot a lot of threes. How many threes? Will it be as many threes as Florida Gulf Coast? Will it truly be Florida Gulf Coast North? All of that remains to be seen, and I am fascinated to see how it plays out in the ATL.
Yeah, I saw him give a quote today that said, everybody's taking threes. So let's see it. Kind of, you know, I think we talked about this when he first took the job. You know, this is just a fascinating move, and, you know, I would just want to see if it works in the WNBA. You know, where, you know, the WNBA and the NBA, like there can be a lot of like copycatting and a lot of similarity in styles. So like for something different to come, the way that Carl Smesco sees basketball and likes to coach basketball, I think I welcome that, you know, just for something new in the league and to see if it works.
And I think to the casual WNBA fan or newcomers to the league, or at the very least, if you follow the W, but you follow other sports more, this notion of Florida Gulf Coast, like it would be one thing if raining threes was a thing at the University of Florida, playing in the SEC, the best conference in college basketball, and you hire him from there. Maybe it's a different pedigree. Trust me, Florida Gulf Coast has dominated. Yes, it's a low major conference, but they have dominated the ASUN, unlike pretty much any team in both the men's and the women's college basketball ranks over the last 20 years. So there is proof of concept from his time in the college ranks, albeit, yes, not at the SEC or Big Ten level. But I think he has the respect of so many valued basketball minds that at the very least, that is why he's getting this shot.
Yeah. Florida Gulf Coast, 11 NCAA tournament appearances in the past 14 seasons. 4 times Florida Gulf Coast won their first round game, which was almost always against a Power Four opponent. I think most recently Washington State, Virginia Tech. Kirsten Bell was somebody who was on one of those teams. They beat an Elizabeth Kitley Virginia Tech team. I remember that, up at the University of Maryland. Carl Smesko also, while he was at Florida Gulf Coast, 479 wins and 91 losses at the Division I level. And that's a winning percentage of 84%. It's pretty good. It's pretty good. I think during his time at Florida Gulf Coast, he was approached and interviewed for a bunch of Power Four jobs. I think USC was among them. I think Indiana was among them. There was a lot of times where he was approached and asked to kind of take Power Four jobs, and he stayed and stayed and stayed. And now this opportunity is here for him.
Another new face in the W, or at the very least, new face in new place. Your nominee, Mitch, for proof of concept in the preseason Wubbies.
Yeah, I just want to see if Kurt Miller can remake the Dallas Wings into a successful franchise. He reworked this roster. You got Paige Beckers, you got Isaiah James, you got Dejanay Carrington, you got Nalissa Smith, you got all these pieces now, right? You put them around Enrique Gumbawale. Let's see if it works. Let's see what happens. I need to see it. Can I guess like that lineup, like, is that a lineup? Like 3 guards and 2 forwards? Like, can that work? I don't know. How much are we going to see? Like, how much are we going to play? Now, Kurt Miller, is in the GM seat, but he is the one who has made this roster. I believe their head coach is Chris. I don't want to butcher his last name. It's Koklianis, something like that.
Yes, Koklianis with the hair, with the flow.
Yeah, with the hair. Former
USC associate head coach. Yes.
Yeah.
Another college coach jumping to the W.
Yeah, for sure. I believe was Kurt Miller's former assistant, I think, with Connecticut Sun or Los Angeles Sparks, or maybe both of those places. Probably should have done my homework a little bit on the Dallas Wings before making my pick here. But yeah, I just, for all the talk about, does Paige want to go there? Are they going to do an Eli Manning? Blah, 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 blah. Now she's there. Now you got to make it work. And can you make it work? Can you make this the place where potentially, can Paige Becker spend her entire career here, or at least her first 2 contracts, and maybe win a ring the way that Brianna Stewart did that in Seattle? Let's see it. Let's see.
Paige Becker's Cooper Flag in the same city. Don't call it a comeback for Dallas. Maybe the Wings will have something to say later this summer in the WNBA 2025 postseason. Did I go there? Maybe. It's time for last call on this week's edition of the Women's Basketball Podcast, Mitch. I promised to hit this when it occurred to me. I hadn't put it in the rundown, so let's go right to it. Did you see the clip? It's floating around TikTok right now of Sidonia Prince playing in Latvia.
I did not see that. Someone told me today that she did sign overseas. I just hadn't been keeping tabs on her. So she is playing overseas, indeed, apparently.
Yes. Okay. I haven't looked up stats. I haven't looked up how she fared in her first game. All I saw was the clip of starting lineups, and I got a kick out of, and this has no bearing on what she looks like, which is hilarious because she's about 3 heads taller than every one of her teammates.
Sure.
So someone put in the comments, an American in Latvia playing basketball. This is giving Winston Bishop vibes. New Girl fans, you know what I mean by that. So I did get a kick out of the Winston Bishop reference. But yeah, Sidonia Prince has emerged. She's overseas playing in Latvia.
Okay, I'm seeing a clip of her now playing in Lebanon.
Okay, so maybe it's not Latvia. Maybe it's I got the wrong L country.
Yeah, there's a couple of those over there. I don't know. Yeah, here we go. Sidonia Prince had signed with Al Riyadi of the Women's Lebanese Basketball League. Okay. She finished her debut with 13 points, 9 rebounds, 3 assists, 2 blocks, and 1 steal. Sure. I guess.
She has appeared.
Yeah, good. I guess good for her.
Went undrafted. Don't know if we'll hear from her again, but I just needed to get a New Girl reference off. Speaking of getting picks off and ideas off, Did you see, and this probably has been around for a couple of years, I just have never seen it promoted quite as much, that you can play fantasy women's basketball on ESPN. Have you partaken ever in this sport, Mitch?
I have not, but I was looking around maybe for a league to potentially join this year. I play a lot of fantasy football, but I have not played fantasy WNBA.
I'm like fascinated, but it's all over the ESPN homepage, and I was like, wow, they're leaning in. Credit to ESPN where credit is due, and now I'm wondering if we should have the women's basketball podcast league, because man, oh man, maybe it's going to be a thing this summer, maybe it's not, but either way, it does sound like a lot of fun.
Who's the number one pick in, like, I don't know, like, what's valued in fantasy basketball? Because, like, football, it's like, okay, I need to take the receiver who's going to get 80 catches and 10 touchdowns, the guy that's going to get, a lot of volume.
I would assume someone who is just a shooter.
You
Like
just
I
go
would,
after scoring, yeah.
yeah, I think it's scoring. Kevin used to play NBA fantasy, so I think we may have to bring him out of retirement and help us figure out exactly what goes into
Okay.
building a women's basketball fantasy dynasty. And maybe that's what we're going to do this summer. Besides joining you each and every week here on the Women's Basketball Podcast. Mitch, anything from you before we get out of here?
I don't really have anything to plug. I just wanted to mention, I just saw this, that the Connecticut Sun are for sale.
Oh,
Um, so yeah, that's from Sportico, broke earlier today. They have hired a investment bank, Allen and Company, to explore the sale of the franchise.
interesting.
They're valued at something like $80 million. I kind of wonder if they get sold, if that means they'll be moved. Because we've seen the Connecticut Sun play a couple games in Boston over the years. I know that Philly really wants a WNBA team. I wonder if that's going to happen.
Yeah, and I wonder why it was so low on the headlines list over at ESPN, but it's because we're pushing the fantasy. We're pushing the fantasy women's
It is.
basketball. I'm
Yeah.
here for it. He is Mitch. I am Mia, saying we will catch you next week on the Women's Basketball Podcast.
Deuces.